It's time to talk about Russell Brand. Russell Brand has been around a lot in the last few days. He's been appearing on all the podcasts and the talk shows, those that will have him, people like Piers Morgan and Tucker Carlson, and he's been discussing, ostensibly his new book, which is called 7 Days to Become a Christian. But really, nobody's actually interested in talking to him about the book. And for good reason, because the book is, it's kind of nonsense from start to finish. I mean, there are one or two interesting anecdotes in there, but generally it's a very peculiar thing that he's written very quickly. And we'll talk about that a bit. But the title of this podcast here is Russell Brand, Mad, Bad or Sad. And I thought that was a little bit of an unfair title, really, in many ways, because he's all three. Because we all are. I mean, Russell Brand is obviously a human being like the rest of us, and he has a little bit of madness in him. He has a little bit of badness in him. And, of course, he has some sadness in him as well. And so, I don't think I'm giving away any spoilers to say that... he's not one of those three. He's all of those three things. But, here's a man who has 10, 11, 12 million people who are following him across social media channels. A man who is due to appear in court in October on sexual assault charges. A man who has sort of flip-flopped his way through life, and one minute he believes in one religion, the next, the moment he's a Christian, before he's been a Buddhist, before that he's been an atheist. He used to be an extreme left-wing socialist, and now, of course, he's a member of the MAGA movement, an extremely right-wing. He used to be a kind of quite a sane guy in many respects, and he used to take on real kind of social issues in London and be a spokesperson for certain minority groups. And of course now he is the opposite of that. He's become a conspiracy theorist in that way. So his new book, well, what can I say about it? I mean, it's a jumbled mess of anecdotes and kind of religious fervour, platitudes, conspiracy. It's really unreadable, and that's why in most of the interviews he's done, which were about the book, he hasn't really mentioned the book at all. It's something that we just pass over. I mean, what's at the heart of this is, I think, it's preparation for his court case, really, in many ways. It's a kind of disguised statement of defence in many ways. It's kind of saying, I've changed, but it's full of obfuscation. Is it obfuscation, where you kind of, you seem to be saying a lot of things, but actually when you analyse the words, it's not actually saying anything. It's a lot of that. It sounds very profound, but there's very little there. And so the whole thing becomes very opaque. So if that is his statement of defence, I do suggest that he gets a solicitor. But look, it's up to him whether he wants to write a book about how to become a Christian in 7 days and whatever. I mean, he has his own reasons, and I'm not here to criticise the book. Interestingly, I think we can learn a lot about where Russell Brand is at the moment by the fact that he kind of tried to exonerate David Icke on his Piers Morgan interview. Basically the Icke was right thing. Now, without getting into the whole subject, I mean, the fact is that I haven't even heard Icke's name mentioned really on social media for a long, long time. I mean, he really has been buried and forgotten. I mean, he's kind of the legacy conspiracy theorist. And he's now kind of semi-retired in the Isle of Wight, David Icke, and he's still putting out his books, but he hasn't really said anything of interest for many, many years. But interesting for Brand to mention it. Icke was right. And I think that kind of, sums up where we are with Russell Brand, because let's think about, is he mad? Well, how are we going to define mad? Well, we've got to define it in some way before we can answer the question. And so I'm going to define it. I'm going to say that sanity, if sanity is dedication to reality, then madness is moving away from reality. And almost everything now that Russell Brand stands for is not only contentious, but generally he's fallen down the kind of rabbit hole of conspiracy, and his concept even of Christianity is peculiar in many ways. It seems to be, a cloth that's been made out from him. He's made his own kind of religious cloth, which he wears. And I'm not really convinced about it at all. I think I don't know whether it's the stress he's been under, or whether it's been the years of drug use, or whether it's just that, the human brain is plasticine, and he's been so involved with his kind of, stance on social media as a kind of right-wing conspiracist, that I wonder whether or not he's kind of lost touch a little bit with reality. Like, in a way, like David Icke. I'm not saying that he doesn't touch upon, things that are possibly relevant and important, power structures and corporate responsibility, but he just kind of loses it. Very peculiar attitude to vaccines, and rather evasive in many ways, and happy to make the big statements but evasive on the details. It's very typical of this kind of person. So I forced myself to have a look at him, not as a psychologist, but as a sociologist, in this latest round of interviews he's been doing. The one with Tucker Carlson, I think, was the only time I actually felt physically ill, when watching something of this type. The last time I felt physically sick watching something was when I saw Richard Curtis's film Love Actually, and the overbearing sort of sentimentality of that film, the dishonesty of that film, the cynicism of that film, and the what's the word? The dangers of that film. The harm that film did actually made me physically sick. Now, if any of you are thinking, what the hell is he up to now, going on about Love Actually? Why would that make you physically sick? Well, simply because, rather like Brand, actually, it gives a completely false idea of what life is all about. That here is a London where things resolve themselves, where people have large groups of friends and family around them, where there's always somebody around who's supportive when they get into trouble, that everybody speaks with this rather posh accent, and where the privilege is just part of being a London resident. And it just disgusted me, the whole thing from start to finish. I'm not saying that everybody has to make kitchen sink dramas, but it was so sickly and sentimental, and it would just leave people thinking, well, I wish I had a life like that. But there is no life like that. It was just a pure slightly utopian vision by Curtis, as usual, and I think it was just appalling. But I felt obviously physical sickness when I saw Tucker Carlson. The smugness of these two talking to each other as though they had some form of special God-given insight, and it was just so transparently ridiculous. I'm reminded of that book, Stupid White Men. Very much. Here were two white guys who knew very little about the world, actually, talking to each other about really big, profound subjects, but in this really childish, naive, silly way, and reinforcing each other's ideas. I mean, almost everything is wrong that's wrong with humanity was in that interview between Tucker Carlson and Russell Brand. And I don't think I wouldn't recommend anybody to watch it. I have to watch it for reasons, to do with making a comment about it. But it was bad. It was kind of a cynical religious Western Christian extremism on display, and yet that kind of complete naivety about geopolitical issues, about the essence of religion, the history of religion, what is religion. Brand thinks Jesus he's reinvented Jesus in his own image, as a kind of Woodstock hippie, really. And at the top of the interview, of course, Carlson, before he even says anything, basically, he says that just want to start by saying, I believe you're innocent of all the charges. Well, there you go. Whatever works. So is he mad? Well, he is mad. Yeah, he's a little bit mad because he's lost touch with reality. And, I suppose in a broader way, you could say that anybody who believes in a God has kind of lost touch with reality because they've invented a belief system for themselves out of nothing. But then when you think about it as a kind of functional coping tool for survival, then actually that's not quite so mad, is it? But you get the feeling with Brand that the sort of concoction of sort of religious fervour, the born-again kind of fervour, and his devotion to these right-wing conspiracy theories, it makes for a heady mix, which any analysis will reveal is a kind of step away from reality. But, there you go. Is he bad? I'm not really. Well, I can't comment obviously on the charges against him, although I suspect that, well, he, in his own words, actually says that it was not a particularly moral thing to do. But is he actually bad? Well, I'm entitled to my own opinion on Russell Brand, and I'm going to qualify this by saying that he's obviously, a bright, intelligent guy. And it's such a shame in a way that he used to write about sports, actually. And he wrote some really interesting pieces about football matches and things like that in the Guardian once, in another era, 20 years ago. And it's a shame that he still doesn't do that kind of thing. So is he bad? Well, yeah, I do think he's bad. That's my opinion. I think he's bad. I don't think he's personally evil, but I think what he does is bad. I would say that what he does is incredibly harmful. I don't think, looking at the entire oeuvre of Russell Brand, from the minute he was given that silly MTV job or whatever it was, I can't remember, right through to where he is now on Rumble, just spouting nonsense to his followers, I don't think he's added a single iota of value to this world. I really don't. And I've got nothing against the guy, but I just don't think he's brought any real value to anybody. Okay, I think he's just sort of sown discontent and he's chased lies, and I think that he is in a 24/7 trap of trying to justify himself to the world all the time, and I think that's where he is. So yeah, although I don't think he is bad, I think that what he does has no value. So that's not far off, is it? So the third thing, is he sad? Well, we're all a bit sad, aren't we? I mean, as you get older, what is left? When all the big battles have been either won or lost, have you got a family? Have you held that together? Are you divorced? Have you split up? Are you in prison? Are you out of prison? Your career is over. When all the battles have been fought, and there's very little left except to wait until death, what is there except a kind of sad dignity, a kind of melancholia that haunts you like a cloud? I mean, that's normal, that's natural. So of course he's going to be a bit sad, you know. But is he a sad person? Well, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how he feels, whether he feels that or not. I think he should do, really, in a way. I think he should do, because I think he should recognise that he has actually, he's got enormous, he has got talent, he has got a kind of, potential within him. He has all the tools. He has the articulacy, he has a quick wit, and he's used it for nefarious kind of purposes, in my opinion. He has not been a great force for good. I know he's wanted to be, but he hasn't been able to stick at it long enough. He gets bored, he moves on, he changes. He's constantly, as I said, trying to justify himself. I wouldn't be surprised if there was a little bit of sadness in there, but he may have kind of gone to the other side of the fence. I mean, I've told you many times before, I haven't got very many anecdotes, but one of them is that I did actually interview David Icke once, and I was really surprised to find, because I thought the whole thing would be a kind of scam. I thought the whole David Icke industry was sort of, I don't know what I thought, but I did actually find out that this guy sort of genuinely believes everything he says, and that everyone else apart from him is blind and crazy. And I think that might be a little bit like the same with Brand. I mean, I think Brand is probably slightly more self-aware than David Icke. And if you're wondering why I'm comparing David Icke to Brand in this way, it wasn't me. David Brand. Well, that says it all. Brand himself mentioned David Icke in the Piers Morgan interview. I nearly fell off my stool, because nobody mentions David Icke anymore. Nobody should mention David Icke anymore. Leave him in the Isle of Wight, where he could have a quiet retirement. Is he sad about the court case that's coming? Is he sad about what happened there? I don't know. Probably regretful. I'm not actually, I think I know what's happened there, but I'm not allowed to mention it for obvious reasons, because I don't particularly want to get in trouble. So I'm not going to mention any more about that. So yeah, in conclusion, maybe I need to find an antidote to my sickness, having watched Carlson and Brand have their kind of mutually assuring, cosy chat. Very quickly at the end, I could ask if Tucker Carlson is mad, bad and sad, isn't it? I don't think so. I think there's an American vocation, it's a kind of extension of the shock jock, isn't it, really? And that's been around for at least 40 years, maybe more. But it's a career path, it's a vocation. Now, the shock jocks initially, they might have been sort of quite crude, and they were on sort of cable networks. But in a way now, in this social media world of attention, there's different variations of the shock jock, and I think really Carlson is that. He probably does actually believe in some of the things he says, but I don't really think he thinks about it too much. I think he does his thing, and then he goes home and plays tennis or whatever he does. Gets attacked by demons. All right, so, I do wish Russell Brand the best. And I really wish that he would, in a way, let go of this endless need to justify himself in many different ways, whether it be, look how I've ditched the past and I'm now a kind of hyper-religious, or now I'm a kind of anti sort of corporate guy. Now I'm pro right. He just moves, and he's a shapeshifter. And it would be great if he finally found a way to ditch that costume and, had a reckoning, because he's rather like Ricky Gervais, somebody who is talented, but but it's not really bringing any value into the world.